We're in Daf Yomi by the two dots. Itmar. Hashoichet Yud Amid Aleph by the two dots. We are in Yud Amid Aleph by the two dots. Yud Amid Aleph.
Two dots, like about 12 lines.
All those listening to the recording. Yay. Okay, Itmar. Hashoichet Besakin V'nimtza Beguma. So you take a knife. You inspect the knife before you shecht. The knife is clean of nicks before you shecht. You shecht an animal, and then a while later, you check the knife and there's a nick. Now the question is, when did it develop? Did it develop as you're beginning the cut? Did it catch on the hide of the animal? And therefore, when you shechted the animal, it was using a problem knife and the animal's a treifa? Or did it happen afterwards? That's the shaila. When did it happen? It definitely developed. Did it develop as you're beginning the shechita, or maybe after the shechita? Maybe at the end of the shechita, after you've already severed the neck. Maybe you nicked, as we'll see in a moment. Maybe you nicked a bone at the back end of the animal, or perhaps it happened later in the day when you were using the knife and walking around with the knife. You banged into something. We don't know when it developed. So it's a machlokes. Rav Huna shita is, even if I use that knife to cut bones all day long, so it's very likely that it was developed by the bones later, still psula. Why? Now this shita of Rav Huna is consistent with what we had yesterday. Rav Huna was the one who said that an animal when it's alive has a cheskas iser, because it's evim and achai, and that cheskas iser is only removed when you could basically definitively say it was shechted properly. Because now a shaila has arose with the knife, the cheskas iser is not removed. And therefore, even if throughout the day I chopped bones, and very likely that it was developed by that, the cheskas iser is only removed if I know with certainty the shechita was done properly, because there's a shaila with a knife, and I don't know when that shaila arose, and it's possible it arose b'shas shechita. Therefore, the cheskas iser, meaning normally when you shecht, you have a cheskas heter, as we said yesterday. But because there's a shaila in the knife, there's a reyesa, meaning there's an issue here. Because there's an issue, that removes that proper shechita certification, and now we're back to cheskas iser. You can't definitively remove the cheskas iser. Yeah, but right now, there's a problem with the knife. So that cheskas heter is gone. Yeah, but I don't know when it developed. Meaning, whenever you have a... True, but the point is, his point is that you're starting off with a cheskas iser. It's not just like you're not in an isolated case with a knife. You're starting off with a problem, and you need to remove said problem. And therefore, it's not going to be. That's Rav Huna shita. This is consistent with yesterday. Rav Chizda says no. Kasheira shema be'etzem nifkama. Rav Chizda says no. Maybe it was you probably damaged it on the bone. It's fine. Rav Chizda is lenient. Now, the Gemara will clarify what happens if you didn't chop bones. What if you just shechted one cow? Rav Chizda is still lenient. I'll just spoil it. The Gemara is going to say that Rav Chizda is concerned that when you shecht the cow and you go through the neck, you might have nicked the bone on the back of the neck of the animal. The point is Rav Chizda is lenient. Now, as we're going to see, we did mention before there is a cheskas iser and there is a reyesa and a problem developed. So Rav Chizda says, I'll tell you why Rav Chizda is lenient over here. Rav Chizda says, the shaila did not develop on the shechita, on the animal. The shaila developed on the knife. He looks at it as a separate thing. If there was a shaila on the animal itself, meaning if the shechita was done, let's say there's a shaila of whether you did shehiyah or hadrasa, or there's a shaila whether the animal is a treifa or the animal is an avail, that's one thing. He's looking at it as because the shaila is isolated to the knife itself, and it's not to the animal, it's not considered as big of a reyesa. Even though I do know that the shaila on the knife will definitely directly affect the animal, he looks at it as that is not as the same reyesa. Because the shaila is not on the animal, the shaila is on the knife, he looks at it as a little differently. Today's daf is not difficult in like pashup shat. It's difficult more in lumdus. So we'll see it inside. Rav Chizda Omar ksheira shema be'etzem nifka. Perhaps the knife nicked while cutting the bone. So Bishlam Rav Huna Kishmaite, I have this in Rav Huna because he's Lishitasa from yesterday, that there's a cheskas iser, and in order to remove the cheskas iser, you need to have a perfect shechita without any shilas. Over here, because there's a problem with the knife, a shaila has arisen. Elo Rav Chizda Maitaima. What's Rav Chizda's svara? You have a shaila on the knife. So as we'll see in a moment, he believes that there's a difference between a shaila on the knife and a shaila animal. But still, you have a cheskas iser. So what's going on over here? So Rav Chizda... on the animal when it's alive. It starts off also. You're starting off with a problem, and you need to remove said problem by shechting it properly. Because the shaila arose with the shechita, or in this case the knife, why is a chizda lenient? So chizda says like this, very simple. Chizda amarlach etzem vade poigim. Well, okay, out of the two situations, I have a nick on the knife. The choices are, it happened because I know it didn't develop before. I know that the knife, when I picked up the knife to shecht, it was clean. It developed at some point. It either developed as I'm beginning the shechita on the neck of the animal, the hide, which hides are not, it's not hard, it's not thick, I mean it's thick, but it's not enough to make a nick. Or it developed when I hit a bone. Suffolk and vadai. A bone can vadai cause a nick. The hide of the animal is a small percentage. I'll go with the statistics. That's what Chizda's response. Chizda says, or Suffolk poikim, Suffolk loy poikim. Regarding to a hide, whether a hide can create a nick is a shaila. It's a Suffolk. It's a doubt. But etzem vadai poikim. But the bone can for sure cause a nick. So have a Suffolk uvadai. They ain't Suffolk moitzim. They vadai. I'm going to go with the vadai here. I'm going to go with statistical probability that the nick was caused by the bone, then the alternative, which is it was as you're cutting the animal, which is like the hide of the animal, is not going to cause a nick, and therefore I'm going to go with the bone. It's a good point. Now the problem is, you have over here, again, a shaila arose, so Rav Huna just says, well, I'll go with cheskas iser. Meaning Rav Huna, I understand that, but Rav Huna looks at it as like this. A shaila arose, I'm just going to go with, it started off in iser, it remains an iser. Rav Huna is very simple. He's not going into, he's not trying to figure out what happened. He's just saying, listen, a shaila arose, unless you can tell me 100% we're good, it's a problem. Rav Chizda says, no, even though the shaila arose, I got to try to figure out what happened. Here's the issue. When it comes to a mikvah, a very similar circumstance, Rav Chizda is lenient in this case, but when it comes to a mikvah case, we're actually strict. And the question is, what's the difference? We'll see it inside. The Gemara says, Masiv, so that's the Gemara's question. Masiv Rav L'Sila Rav Huna. The Gemara Rav asks a kasha from a brayso that supports Rav Huna, and it's a shaila and Chizda. Taval v'Allah v'Nimtza Olav Davar Chaitzis. You go to the mikveh, and you find afterwards that there was a chatzitza. There was something on your skin. I don't know, let's say some tar or whatever, something on your skin to cause a chatzitza. Now the question is, when did it develop? Did it develop before or did it develop after? Now in this case specifically, after he went to the mikveh, he was dealing with tar all day. So if you look at it from a statistical perspective, most likely it was after. On the other hand, you start off with a tumah, or a cheskas tumah. Sirot halacha is, afal b'shem esasik b'isem in kol yom kuloi, even though you were dealing with this tar all day long, loy also leit tefillah. It's a problem. Unless you can prove definitively that it was not on you, it's a problem. Now this is a very similar situation. You started off with the animal as a problem, and you need to prove that the shechita was done properly. You start off that the person is tameh, and you have to prove that the mikveh was done properly. Rav Chizda says that with the animal, it's fine. We look at the statistical probability. A mistama nicked on the bone afterwards, not on the skin. But when it comes to the mikveh, we don't say, well, he's dealing with tar all day. We just say, it's a problem. Okay, but that shouldn't make much of a difference.
If you didn't check the knife, we say he's not kosher because it's probably nicked before. Here, you check the knife. The shizdu was good. Now you have a nick after. If he had checked himself before he went to the mikveh, there's no shiloh.
Yeah, I hear your points, but I don't think the Gemara makes a difference. I was thinking about that. It's a good point. Not sure. The Gemara says, "V'hacha v'adei taval." You definitely went to the mikveh. Safek havala, safek loy havala. It's a safek when it arose, meaning ekasi safek midayis midei v'adei. Over here, you v'adei went to the mikveh. It's a shaila statistically when it happened. I would say it probably happened afterwards. It's a problem. So what do you see? You see that the suffix of an issue can override the mustama what happened. So the Gemara says, no, Shani Hasam de'ikalamemer hemet tamei achazkasev emeloi tava. That's different because over there you start off with an issue, and that is you start off with the person being tamei. So you have to remove said issue. So the Gemara quickly responds, the animal's the same thing. You start off with the animal being non-kosher because it's a cheskas iser because it's eivim nachai. Hachanami hemet behem achazkasev ameloi nishchata. The Gemara says, yeah, but it's different. But you did shech the animal. You did it, the process. So the Gemara says, well, I went to the mikveh. It's back and forth. The Gemara says, Hachanami, hari tavel fanecha. Hosyalad reisa. Yeah, but the shaila arose at the mikveh. Hachanami salad reisa. But the shaila arose with the shechita. So the Gemara says this distinction, again, in Lumdis, is a little bit hard to understand, but the Gemara says this is the distinction. Sakin Isroi, behema lo Isroi. The subject by the mikveh is the person. A reisa happened on the person. When it comes to the shchita, the subject is the animal. The shaila did not arise with the animal. The shaila arose with the knife. I understand that, but the Gemara feels that makes a distinction of where the shaila arose. Did the shaila arise with the knife or with the behema itself? Because the behema itself did not have the shaila, it's with the knife, and it's possible that developed afterwards, we're going to be lenient. That's Rav Chizda's psak. So the Gemara, this is the back and forth of Chizda and Rav Huna. So Meisvei, I have a kasha, you tell me that again. The shaila is where you shecht, you check before, you shecht, and then a nick on the knife, you find the nick afterwards, and the question is when it developed. So the Gemara is a kasha from a brisa. The brisa basically says this added line of, as we'll see in a moment, kol safik b'shchita pasel. And the question is, what is that line referring to? Is it not referring to this case? And the answer is no. As we ask the Gemara. The Gemara says, Meisvei, shachar es aveshen. If someone is shechting and he's cutting a bird's esophagus, v'yachekach nishmata hagageres, and afterwards the trachea becomes detached. Now, if a trachea becomes detached, that's a sign of a treifa. If the animal's already shechted, no problem. So then it's kosher because it happened after the shechita. That's fine, obviously. If it happened in the reverse case, that the trachea became dislocated, which is a treifa, and then you shecht, of course it's a problem. It's psula because it was a treifa before the shechita. Now this is both are pashut. That's I shecht I cut the esophagus. And then I check, and the trachea is dislocated. And the question is, I don't know when it developed. Did it develop before the shechita and it's a treifa, or did it develop after the shechita and it's not a treifa? This shaila came up. V'amru kol safik b'shechita pasel. They said it's possible, but instead of just saying possible, they said kol safik b'shechita pasel. By the way, it makes sense why it's possible, because you have an animal as again cheskas iser until you could prove otherwise. Fine, but it didn't just say possible; it said kol safik b'shechita pasel. This added line, this general line of kol safik b'shechita. What is it referring to? Is it not referring to our case where you had a knife develop a nick afterwards, you don't know what had happened, and you say it's possible, and it's a shayla and a chizda? The Gemara says, Loi, safik shah, safik doras. Not a shayla with a knife, a shayla of whether you did the shechita properly. Meaning the knife is good. I shecht, and we're not sure whether I paused in middle. So that's a suffix whether the actual behema was shechted properly, not a shayla with a knife. That was a shayla of more of a shayla of the behema itself. That's when it's a problem. But the Bryce is not addressing our case b'chlal. Go to the next page. Now, umayshna, what's the difference between a shayla in the maisa shechita or a shayla in the knife afterwards? So the Gemara says, again, Lamdis is a little bit hard to understand, but the Gemara says this line: Hasam is yalad reisa behema. If it's a shayla whether the shechita was done properly, that's considered a reisa, a question on the behema itself. That's a problem. But when the knife developed a nick, that's sakin isroi, behema lo isroi. That's a shayla on the knife, not the behema. I get it. Even though a shayla on the knife will definitely directly affect the behema, but it's a more of it's a step removed. Now, no, it does, because you do have a cheskas, you do have the maisa shchita, which seemingly was done properly. A shaila arose, but it's not a shaila in the maisa shechita itself. It's a shaila in the knife, which might be completely unrelated. Because if the knife developed a nick 10 minutes later, it's b'chalal no shaychus. Now, so you had a shaila in our case. Now let's just talk about extreme cases. You have Rav Huna who says every single time it's a problem. Let's put Rav Huna on the side. He's just saying it's always a problem. I don't care when the knife developed a nick. I could be chopping bones all day. It's a problem. Then you have Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda says it's fine. Why? Because I might have nicked it on the bone. But Rav Chizda did not specifically address a case when you're chopping bones all day. Rav Chizda said, even if you're chopping bones all day, it's fine. But Rav Chizda is actually lenient in all situations. I mean, the Gemara is saying, Rav Chizda would just said kosher. He just said kosher. The Gemara says, even if you're chopping bones all day, Rav Huna feels it's a problem. But Rav Chizda is actually machshir in all circumstances.
Well, you said the bone is ass behind.
Oh no, so that's because I spoiled the Gemara. The Gemara originally said that you're chopping bones all day, and Rav Chizda is machshir. But the truth is, Rav Chizda is machshir even if you're not chopping bones all day. So the Gemara speaks that how do we paskin? Hilchasa kavasi de Rav Huna kishaloi shibra ba'etzem. We're only lenient like Rav Chizda when you're chopping bones afterwards. Meaning, if you just do one shecht of an animal and then there's a nick, we paskin that's a problem. If I shech the animal and then all day long I'm chopping bones, then we'll be lenient because then, okay, mastama was developed by the bone. But Rav Chizda Rav Chizda is binary. always okay. Rav Huna, it's always a problem. We paskin like Rav Chizda when you were chopping bones, and like Rav Huna when you were not chopping bones. But Rav Chizda and Rav Huna are just straight up arguing in all circumstances.
Chopping bones or like doing other things.
We're doing anything that would develop a nick, that could realistically cause a nick to develop. I'm sure if you're hitting metal, like I'm saying, the point is doing something that would cause a problem to the knife statistically. No, so we'll get to it. So the Gemara says, wait. So Rav Chizda and Rav Huna are arguing in all circumstances. Rav Huna always feels it's a problem. Rav Chizda always feels it's okay. So says the Gemara, again, we passing like Rav Chizda when you're chopping bones. But the Gemara says, Mechad Rav Chizda, Afal Gavdaloi Shiba Ba'etzem. Rav Chizda is lenient in all circumstances, but here's the question. So El B'mai Ifkim, practically, if you ask Rav Chizda, when did the knife develop a nick? If you only shechted one animal, when did it develop? So the Gemara says, Ema be'etzen de mefarkis ifkim. It was in the back of the neck. Meaning, you might have gone through too far and hit the back of the neck, and that's when it developed a neck. Now, Hava Uvda. Now, okay, so you have again, Rav Chizda and Rav Huna arguing, Rav Chizda, it's all fine. Rav Huna, it's all a problem. Says the Gemara, Hava Uvda, the Taraf. Now, again, we're talking Pashas where you shechted one animal. Now, what if I check a knife, I shecht 13 animals straight. Then I check and there's a nick. So let's talk about what the halacha should be. Rav Huna would say it's all a problem. Again, Rav Huna, it's treif. All 13 are treif. Easy. Throw them all out. Fine. The question is Rav Chizda. So Rav Chizda says it's fine. So the question is, did Rav Chizda kasher all of them or just the first? Because Rav Chizda's whole point is that it developed a nick when it hit the back of the neck. If it hit the back of the neck of the first animal, then the subsequent 12 are a problem, but the first one is kosher. Or do you say, as the Gemara is going to counter, perhaps, if you're going to be lenient in the world of Rav Chizda and sort of find like a limud schus, that instead of saying that it hit a nick on the back of the first animal, maybe it hit the nick on the back of the last animal. Let's go through. The Gemara says, Hava Uvda, there was a Maisa where a person shechted 13 animals in a row and then inspected the knife and without inspecting in between, which by the way, the Gemara is going to point out, you're supposed to inspect in between each shechita to avoid these type of issues. But if you did not inspect until after shechting all 13 animals, V'taraf Rav Yosef at Tleisar Havasa, and Rav Yosef said it's a problem. Now, Rav Yosef did not say who he's following. Like, if he said all 13 are a problem, he's following Rav Huna. If when he said it's a problem, he wasn't referring to all 13, then perhaps he's following Rav Chizda. So the Gemara speaks it out. Kiman, ki Rav Huna afilu b'kamaisa, is he following Rav Huna and saying that all 13 are a problem? No. Ki Rav Chizda lebar mekamaisa. He's following Rav Chizda. And the Gemara is saying, so what would Rav Chizda say about this? Rav Chizda would say the last 12 are an issue, but the first one is okay. The Gemara assumes that according to Rav Chizda, you're not going to say that it hit the nick on the last one. It just hit the nick on the first one. So the distinction, the Gemara is saying, between Rav Chizda and Rav Huna, although they were arguing about one animal, because that's pretty clear, the nafka mina would be, if you shech 13, Rav Huna would throw out 13, Rav Chizda would throw out 12 of the 13. The distinction would be the first one. Now, that's the first assumption, that the machloikes between Rav Chizda and Rav Huna is 12 out of 13 or 13 out of 13. The Gemara says, V'iba yisem eloilam k'Rav Huna. The Gemara says, actually, no. It can't be Rav Chizda. Why? Because you're assuming that according to Rav Chizda, 12 out of the 13 would be a problem. Who said? I would counter the opposite. If Rav Chizda is lenient in saying that we could think that the pagam happened at the end of the first shchita, so why can't Rav Chizda say that the pagam happened at the end of the 13th shchita? And all 13 are fine. Right? If the point is, if you're saying that there's a reis on the knife, not the behema, and we're going to be malam and schus, so why are we assuming that according to Rav Chizda you throw out 12 of the 13, maybe you don't throw out any? Why? You'll say because the whole point is that a knife developed a nick when it hit a bone. So maybe it hit the first bone, or maybe it hit the last bone. So maybe Rav Chizda should be lenient. Now the Gemara, just to be fair, the Gemara does not hold on to this. It's going to be clear in a few moments that the Gemara goes back to the first presumption that 12 of the 13 are a problem. The Gemara says, Di Rav Chizda, perhaps, if it follows Rav Chizda, michdi. Let us see. Mitzla talinon. We're being makel anyway by being toila, we're making presumptions to be malamed schos. So why are we saying that the knife developed a nick on the first neck? Maybe it developed on the 13th neck, and all 13 are kosher. And therefore, the fact that Rav Yosef threw them out must be he follows Rav Huna, because if he followed Rav Chizda, all 13 would be okay. Now, the Gemara, just to finish up the sugya, Amar le Rav Acha b'rei Rav le Rav Ashi. Rav Kahana matzich bedikusa ben kol chad v'chad. Rav Kahana required inspection of the knife between each animal. Now, the question is, who is he following? Now, according to Rav Huna, you have to inspect each one, because if you don't inspect each one, that animal itself is a problem. The question is, Rav Chizda, you would not need an inspection for the first animal. You would need, again, let's go back to our presumption before, that Rav Chizda held that out of 13 animals, 12 of the 13 are a problem. We're going to assume that the knife developed the nick after the end of the first animal, and that the 12 are a problem. So according to Rav Chizda, you would need an inspection after the first one. The first one's going to be fine either way, but you would need subsequent inspections between each of the future ones. You need an inspection either way, according to Rav Huna and Rav Chizda. Again, you inspect before, you would need to inspect in between, but according to Rav Huna, you would need to inspect in between each one, and if you didn't, it would potentially go back to the first. Rav Chizda, the first is going to be fine, the inspections would more affect 2 and onward. So Gemara says, Kiman, Kirav Huna v'lemifsal kamaisa, loy Kirav Chizda l'chshur basraisa. Perhaps the requirement of the inspection in between is not for the first one, it's for the second animals and onward. You'll never be able to. The Gemara just says you need an inspection before. According to Chizda and Rav Huna, you both need an inspection. The question is, if you didn't inspect, would it disqualify all of them or just all of them minus the first? And you'll never. The price is not indicating either way.
If you're inspecting between each one,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So both according to the Ericus, you need to inspect between each one.
Correct. The only difference would be if I did not inspect, and then a nick developed. According to Rav Huna, I would throw all of them out. According to Rav Chizda, I would throw all of them out except for the first. You're right. You need an inspection either way. Now, the Gemara just has a quick question. If you need an inspection, and this is not like a chumrah, like you need to inspect the knife. Now, when you start shechting for the first time, when you begin the process, the sheikhid is not the one who inspects it. They give it to a rabbi. I don't know, practically what they do now, I don't know. Conceptually, the rabbi checks. So l'chora, yeah, probably not. But conceptually, you give it to the rabbi to check. Now, the l'chora, shouldn't the rabbi have to check in between each one? Meaning, if we're saying that you give it to a rabbi, let's just go through the math. If I give it to a rabbi and we assume that I have to give it to a rabbi, not just for kavod, like I need a rabbanish person because I don't trust the standard sheikhid. I need the chashivas of the knowledge of a rabbi. And in between each one, I require inspection to avoid treifa issues or nevela issues, whatever it is, then shouldn't I need a rabbi to inspect in between each one? So the Gemara says, Ihachi tiboinami b'dikas chacham. Why is a rabbi not inspecting in between each one? So the Gemara says, Eidachanam b'isurim. Why do you need a rabbi for? He's a shaykhid, he's an Eidachad, he's Nama B'Yisurim. Eidachad Nama B'Yisurim. So the Gemara said, well, okay, if he's Eidachad Nama B'Yisurim, then why is the rabbi checking the first one? So it says the Gemara, Yihachim Yikar Nabi. So the Gemara says, the rabbi is not inspecting the initial knife because you need a rabbi's expertise. He's doing it for kavod. It was a sign to show the kavod of the Rav, that the Rav inspects the knife. But you're right. Me'ikar adin, the shaykh could do it. Eid echad is naman be'isurim. Maybe that's perhaps why nowadays they're not, makbid like that anymore. But conceptually, it's not for, kashrus perspective. It's for kavod of the Rav. And therefore, I don't need the Rav to check in between each one because the kavod was already accomplished. Now, one more topic, and this is going to take us into tomorrow's daf, and that is, it's unrelated to shchita. Yeah?
Was that at one point that, like, the shochet might be biased when he's cutting things? Cause, like,
I never saw that.
okay.
No, I never saw that. That has not come up in Daf Yomi yet. Now, the Gemara says, the Gemara is going to talk about a topic that's not related to Shechita, it's related to Cheskas. We talked about this concept that's like a Cheskas Isser, that when the Chazaka, when a concept is instilled, it remains that way until it's properly removed definitively. So the Gemara says, Minoha milsa dam rabbanon uki milsa b'cheskasi. Where is the source that you have to assume that a status remains unchanged until proven otherwise? So the Gemara says, meaning that if I know something is A, it remains A until I could prove that it's not A anymore. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rav Yonasan, Amar Kra. The pasuk, the source is from a kohen checking the tzaras of a house. There's a size. Let's say the size is 1 gris. Let's say that's a square foot. Right? So the kohen checks it. Now, part of the process the kohen checks it is whatever. I'm just
Then it's a square meter.
whatever. It's whatever. So using a square foot because don't care. We don't have tsaras. By the way, there's never been a tsaras of a house ever. So anyway, so the point is like this. So you have square foot. He checks it. Part of the process of the kohen is he has to go in. He has to check it. He has to then leave the door, close the door of the house. Hisker adelas. He closes the door of the house. He says tameh. Let me ask you a question. From the time that he looks at it, normal people, when you leave a house, you turn your back, right? They're not like when you leave a Rebbe, right? You see the doors over here, tsaras is over there. I look at it, I'm the kohen, I'm like, all right. And I turn and I go. I turn my back. Maybe it got smaller. So you see there's a chezka, the chazaka. The chazaka is things remain unchanged until proven otherwise. And therefore, while you're turning and leaving, even if it's a short amount of time, we don't presume that the thing changed because it has a chazaka. That chazaka is that it remains unchanged. So it says the Gemara, "V'yatza kohen abayis al pesach abayis." He leaves the house. The hiskers abayis. He closes the door. Officially, puts the tape quarantine. Shivas yamim for 7 days. Now, as he's leaving, dilma adenafik v'asa. As he's turning and leaving, batzel ishura. Maybe it got smaller than the gris. So, why aren't we concerned about that? The answer is, it must be you rely on the chazaka. Chazaka remains unchanged. So the Gemara says, wait a minute. Maskler v'achaber Yaakov, two answers. Dilma Kigoyin, question. You're making a presumption that he's not able to watch it as he leaves. Why? Because he turns his back. Maybe he has to walk out the way you walk out from the kotel, right? You walk back out. Maybe he has to back out. The Gemara says, "Dilma kakayin sheyatza derech hachayrav the kachazi like inafik." This is Rav Acha Yaakov. Just remember the name. Rav Acha Yaakov actually holds you have to watch it the whole time. The chazaka does not allow you to assume that it's unchanged. No, you got to watch it as you're leaving. So how do I watch it as I'm leaving? If it's my back's to it, the answer is you leave the way Chassidim leave a Rebbe, which is you turn around and you back out. That's what Rav Acha Yaakov says. The Gemara says, "I'll tell you two issues with backing out. I'll say it outside, I'll say it inside. First of all, that's not the normal way to leave." The pasuk says v'yatza. V'yatza means you go in the normal way. Backing out is not the normal way to leave a room. Secondly, what if it's behind the door? Right? I open the door. If it's Alicia's wall, then as I'm leaving, if I'm backing out, I could watch it. If it's over there, then when I close the door, I can't see through a door. So it doesn't matter. You can back out all you want. There's going to be a few seconds, a few moments where it's behind the door. So those are the two issues that Rav Acha Yaakov's way, Rav Acha Yaakov's solution that he holds that you really have to watch it the whole time. There's not a source for chazaka. So how do you watch it the whole time? So the answer is back out. Yeah, but backing out is not the normal derech. And also, what if it's behind the door? So it says the Gemara, Amalei Abaya, Shtei Tshuvos B'Dara. I had two issues with your point. First of all, Chada, Yitzia Derech Achayev Lo Shmaitzia. Leaving backing out is not considered normal derech. V'oid Acharei Del. Remember, what if it's behind the door? So the Gemara says, I'll counter you. Your first issue is that it's not normal to back out that way. Well, that's how the Kohen Gadol backed out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So you see that you have a precedent that leaving a room in the Torah is done that way. And number two, you said the issue with the door, if it's behind the door, so cut a window. That's an easy, I can't see it, so cut a window. So you cut a window, you'll be able to watch it as you're leaving. You're looking through the window, okay, easy. So it says the Gemara, V'chi tema, Shei Tshuvos is over. Achayri Del is Michael and Memar. Now, Gemara says, so make a window. If you make a window, then you'll be able. So the Gemara says, no, that's not good. But the Mishnah says, base Eiffel, let's say you have a house that's super dark, right? There's no light, there's no windows. So the Kohen is not able to see. When he goes inside, he can't see whether there's tsaras. Ever. You know what the halacha is? He doesn't have to cut a window open. So what do you see? There's no obligation to open a window. Now, the Gemara assumes that the same way there's no obligation to make a window in order to initially see it, there's no obligation to make a window to continue seeing it, which the Gemara will point out in a moment, maybe is not the case. But Tanan Beis Eiffel, if you have a dark room, you're not obligated to make a window. So you see, there's no obligation to make a window. There is no tsaras. Tsaras does not apply in such and such. It's not tameh.
If you don't see it, it's not there.
If you don't see it, it's not illegal. So the Gemara says, it's the Homer Simpson line as he's driving through the red light. Clarification. So the Gemara says, Bekitzer, so the Gemara says, if you close the door, again, backing out is not an option because it's not the normal derech. And what if it's behind the door? You're not be able to see it. I make a window. I'm not obligated to make a window. So the Gemara says, no. Amalei Rabbi responds, First of all, you said that backing out is not the normal derech. Well, that's how the Kohen Gadol did it, so there is a precedent. Maybe you are obligated to back out. Meaning, maybe Rav Yaakov is right. You have to be able to see it as you're leaving. So how do I do this? Back out, walk out, backing out. So you see it says Yitzia by the Kohen Gadol, and that was the normal way. And the second point, which is that if it's a dark house, you're not obligated to make a window. That just shows you that the initial seeing is not obligated to be done through the mode of a window. But Kenzain, if I actually saw it already, I'm obligated to make a window to continue seeing it. Lav dafka. There's a difference. Uteka'amr beis evo beis ofel ein poisel chalonis liris nigoy hani milahechadol yischazik avahechad yischazik yischazik. That's the Gemara's response. Now, you say, just the Gemara concludes just to finish the sugya. Rav Yaakov was the one who said that I have to see it the whole time. He doesn't believe that this is a source for chazaka, so he said, so how do you see it if it's behind the door? Back out and make a window. The Gemara says, I'll prove to you it's not true. Tanya, Deloik Rav Yaakov, you have a Bryce and not like Rav Yaakov. Why? Because as we're going to see in a moment, the halacha is, I'll just say it outside, we'll see it inside, the halacha is that the Kohen Gadol has to actually be in the house of the tzaras, see it, close the door, and declare it. What if he, instead of doing this, he goes, he sees it, and he's like, all right, he doesn't want to close the door now. I don't know why. He puts a rope to the door, goes to his house next door, and pulls the door closed. That is not what you're supposed to do. Because it says Beisai. He's supposed to be in the house as he does it. Okay. But if he did, the halach is it works. He's in a different house. How is he seeing it? Oh, so you see, you don't have to see it until the last minute because there's a chazak. That's going. And Rav Yaakov, the Gemara is going to say, he counters, okay, maybe there's 5 guys, like 10 guys on a line, and the Kohen Gadol's like, as you're about to pull, Kohen Gadol's like, is it the same size? Yes, pull. That's lav dafka. You're right, he can't see it from a next door neighbor, but maybe he puts up assembly line of people who are Eidim, who are watching it, and they tell him that. So it's let's just see it inside. The Gemara says, Tani Likar Rav Yaakov, we have a brisa that indicates that you do not have to be watching it until you close the door. Why? Because the brisa says, that the kohen leaves the house. You might think that he's able to see the tzaras. Don't close the door. Go to his house with a giant rope and pull the door closed from his house. No, he's supposed to stand at the entrance of said house of tzaras. Now, maybe he doesn't have to actually be standing outside of the house, meaning he could stand in the doorway. He doesn't have to be outside of the house. He could just be under the, what's it called? We don't have it over here, but you should have like a awning. Maybe he could stand under the awning and close the door and call and Tamaloymar min habayis. He has to be standing outside of the archway, fully close the door, take a step back away from the archway and say, Tameh. Okay, fine. Now, he stands outside the lintel and closes the afflicted house, tapes it off. Now, that's what he's not supposed to do. How do I know that if he did it, it's kosher still, meaning it's still a mitzaras? So he stands 2 blocks away with a giant rope and pulls it closed, it works. Oh, you see the pasuk says, so what do you see? How is he watching it if he's 2 blocks away? So you see, you don't have to watch it. And the Gemara ends off with this. Rabbi Yaakov responds, perhaps they do have to watch it the whole time. So how is he watching it if he's next door? He's got a setup of a assembly line. And each one says, it remained a gris, pull, and he closes it. I will stop.